My name is Liz von Goeler. I'm with Sasaki. I'm a principal, and I'm just joining the board of directors as well. I work in a corporate workplace and have been working in Boston for over 25 years now, mostly in commercial office design.
Great. So let's start with the COVID-19 crisis. I'm sure is on a lot of people's minds these days. Talk a little bit about how that has affected the role of the office in the short term to start with, and some of the kind of reactionary measures that companies are taking as employees start coming back to work.
In the short term, there has been a lot of confusion at the beginning as to how the virus was spread and what we really needed to do to help people. At first, we thought that touch was a major way that this was spread, and so looking a lot at clean surfaces, protocols as well for how often surfaces are clean. That's not going to go away, even though it is not the primary way the virus is spread. What we found is that it's really spread more through droplets, through talking, through not wearing a mask. And so making sure that people are following very specific paths through the office so that we're limiting the amount of time that people are within 6 feet of each other, requiring people to wear masks while they're in the office, really looking at changing behaviors in the way that people come together, where they sit, how closely they sit together, how they walk through the office has been a lot of our current work. So we're putting in reminders to socially distance, to walk one direction through the office, to sit at specific seats so that you are a proper distance from people as well.
Okay. So, and you mentioned that, the hand washing and surface cleaning and things like that, those are things that are not going to be going away. And that's certainly probably for the best. But what are some other kind of long-term implications? I mean, hopefully, ideally, the virus isn't going to be with us forever. How are things going to change? How do you see things changing in the long term, either as the virus starts to subside, or even there's a vaccine or whatever, however we end up dealing with it as a society in the future?
We've already seen ourselves and our clients really start to look at the full term of their lease and the full term of their real estate and think about what do they want to do now that they'll be happy living with in the future. And so I think one of the original comments that people started to make was, oh, we're all going to go back to cubicles and we're all going to go back to offices. And when we take a step back and say, maybe this is a year, maybe it's 2, maybe it's a 3-year period out of a 15, 20-year lease cycle, is this really where we want to put our investment? And if it's a culture that's already changed and gone through the hard work of leaving that behind, do we actually want to go back to that? And the answer so far, and I think rightfully so, has been no. We don't want to start putting the physical barriers between people, because we're not going to be at full occupancy of the office until there is a vaccine, until there is a way that you can safely be together with other people. And so why would we change our physical workspace drastically in order to accommodate something that is not behavior that we want to see over that full lease term?
Okay. So that's a nice segue into the next question there. You mentioned behavior. So human beings have been doing things a certain way, for a lot of us, for all of our lives, in terms of going to work and the way we go to grocery stores, or the way we behave in public places and so forth. And so there's an element of human nature here that is perhaps suddenly being disrupted in some way or another, for better or for worse. I guess talk a little bit about that in terms of how offices need to kind of account for that, and how people need to, change their habits and dealing with kind of that period where people are still kind of getting used to a new way of doing things.
Well, the great thing is that we have the perfect interruption to all of the habits that you've had before. Most people have been home for 4 months, and so we can start to create new behaviors, but certainly the habits that people have in existing spaces are some of the hardest things to change. And if you think about campus designs, there's always a story with any university quad where the sidewalks were planned in the wrong spot because they didn't respond to how people were walking through the space. And so we are all going to come back to work with all of these ideas of how we used to move through space, and we're going to have a great opportunity to reprogram people, help them to think about the movement through space in order to keep people safe in the short term, But I think it's also a really great opportunity to start to think about the future. Why do we come to work? Why do we want to be coming to work in the future? And really start to plan the office of the future. Let's maybe look at this as an opportunity that we wouldn't have had otherwise.
Okay, so let's talk about that office of the future then. What is it? What does it look like? How is it going to change from what we've been used to, prior to February or so? And what will be different about it? What will be the same about it? I guess talk a little bit about that office of the future.
Well, I think we're going to start to get past the need for the me space, the need that I have to have a specific desk that keeps my shoes, my tchotchkes, all of the specific items for me, that I don't have a place at work without a specific desk. We've now gone for most of us for 4 months without a specific place at the office. And I think that is probably one of the first things that we can really start to look to disrupt or to look at differently, because I think we can take the value of a worker away from the value of having a desk, which honestly most people don't spend most of their time at work, and look to repurposing that space to other amenity areas that can help you do your work better during the day. I think that we should start to be looking at spaces that respond to introverts. There's plenty of people that do their best work when they are not visible, not on view, like they are in many open offices. I think we can really start to talk about what types of spaces do we need for collaboration. It might be that we start in many companies to look at more of a team room configuration where the team comes to work during the day. They have all of their needs in one space, so that we're also limiting your interaction throughout most of the day with people that are outside of your group. So we're limiting exposure to other viruses, because science is telling us this may not be the only pandemic that we're going to be facing as a society, but allows that team and that group to really work at their best during the day. It might be that we end up with offices that actually look more like large convention centers or more conference centers, because most people are coming to work specifically for the collaborative purposes, specifically to come together. But we have to acknowledge that people are social animals, and we come to work in order to see each other, in order to learn from each other, and in order to enrich our workday.
So is it something you just said there a little bit about, designing for introverts and doing some other things? Is this an example of, virus or no viruses? Are some changes kind of long overdue here in terms of creating spaces that respond to the way human beings, different human beings like to work or like to collaborate, or how they operate?
I think we're at a point where we have companies that are in many different areas in terms of the spectrum of workplace design. For a long time, everyone was in an office and cubicle configuration, and there are still some firms that live in that world. We should not fool ourselves into thinking that every office is an open office opportunity. It most certainly is not. And then we have situations where people are 100% hoteling, and there's a lot in the middle. And I think your response is really going to be dependent on where you're at in this spectrum, what behaviors you want to drive, what actually makes the most sense for your business. Because if we take someone that has a process-oriented job, so something where you're doing the same thing over and over and over again during the day, and you need focus, and we put them in an open office, they're not going to be able to perform properly. And even when we look at an open office situation, there are some situations and some layouts where no one has accommodated for the need of the introvert, where no one has created the quiet spaces or the quiet desks, which again is even harder if they're owned, because they tend to be the ones that are seen as the prime real estate. And so if I'm a lower level introvert, it's harder for me to actually get access to those. But on the other side, when we look at the cubicle environment, it's an absolute nightmare for the extroverts, right? And if you think back to like Dilbert, like no one loved the cubicle, right? Or the movie Office Space, no one loved the cubicle, but it's seeing a little bit of nostalgia, because I think there have been circumstances where open office has been pushed on employees where they haven't necessarily been brought along on the journey, or where it may not actually have been the right decision or the right implementation for the type of work that they do.
Okay. What about some of the, I guess, kind of maybe, for lack of a better term, universal type changes that might be happening in offices and workplaces? And I'm talking specifically here about things like air quality and HVAC and things of that nature, where every office, every building is going to be faced with some challenges as it relates to those types of systems. I guess talk a little bit about the differences that we might start to see in respect to those types of systems.
I think HVAC, cleanliness of air, having good systems, having access to fresh air, which doesn't necessarily mean a window. It could mean like a good amount of fresh air through your HVAC system, one that has good filtration on it as well, because we tend to see many buildings have a lower level of filtration. I would imagine that, but as we're starting to go back to work, a lot of that has actually been fixed. But I think that we're also going to see a lot of touchless technology. We have a lot of clients where we are installing wave to open door openers for bathroom doors on both sides. So locations that are high touch locations, so trying to complement all the things that are touchless in the bathrooms, all the things that are touchless already in the kitchen, and really expand that portfolio. But I think that what we're seeing in society is that this pandemic is actually going to translate into more social considerations in terms of office changes. And so gender neutral restrooms were something that was already having a large push. And I think as we look to increase equality, as we're making changes with the pandemic, we're going to see a lot more gender neutral restrooms that are creating a much more inclusive environment. And I think that we're going to start to see social movements that are being woven into changes that are also part of this pandemic.
Okay, again, so it sounds like it's, again, an opportunity for companies to make some changes that perhaps were needed anyway, right?
In some cases, yes. And there's plenty of buildings where I don't think anyone was really thinking about the quality of the air, but I think they will be. And I would be very surprised if we don't see a push for implementing more of the concepts from WELL certification. Okay. Whether or not that translates into actual certification, I'm not sure, but really thinking about the body and the human being and their health when they're in the space, I think is also going to be important.
Okay. So next I want to talk a little bit about some of the intangible things and differences and changes that we might be looking at as it relates to offices and the way that people gather and work together and so forth. And one of the things that you and I had talked about previously was this idea of trust being kind of like a key part of, a key currency in terms of office design and so forth. Talk a little bit about that and any other, those types of intangibles that are going to be important moving forward.
Well, I think those intangibles also include to some degree, the HVAC system, because nobody thinks about it, right? It also includes principles of WELL, but in my mind, one of the most important things is trust. If I'm going to go to work, I'm going to be there with other people, I have to trust that what they did on the weekend didn't expose them to the virus. I have to trust that they're going to stay home when they're sick and that they're not going to come and infect me, right? I have to trust that if my employer, and in this case I am the employer, says, I'm not going to penalize you for working from home when you're sick, when you're not well, when you need to take care of someone else, that is actually going to be the case, that there will not be a penalty in place. And I think that trust is probably one of the hardest things for all of us to do, right? We know each other during the day for the most part. We know each other as coworkers, but do we really have that level of trust? If there's all sorts of wonderful things that people are doing right now in terms of attending protests. Can I trust that they wore a mask the entire time that they were there? Can I trust that really anywhere you've gone, you've maintained safe practices? And then it's a question of, are my idea of safe practices the same as your idea of safe practices?
Okay. So, and we've touched on this a few times over during our conversation just now, but is this a unique opportunity for architects and designers to help their clients and help businesses kind of start over, I guess, as it relates to office design?
I think that in some cases it does mean an opportunity to start over. I think it's definitely an opportunity to create what is right for you and for your company. And so in many cases that may mean starting over. In other cases it may actually mean not starting over, but really stepping back, questioning how you're doing things. Are you getting the value from your real estate? Are you getting the behaviors that you want to drive from your employees? I think is really the biggest question.
Okay. Talk a little bit about how the pandemic has kind of amplified the role of architects as advisors and professionals who can help their clients kind of solve these really difficult challenges, perhaps that are coming down the road, or maybe already in front of them.
But we have spent a lot of time helping our clients through this pandemic and ourselves as a client as well to understand how we're going to create a safe workplace for our people. And many times we had been advising people on design, on planning, and on things that have kind of an intangible aspect to them. Whereas with COVID-19, with the pandemic, we've definitely moved into something that is much more science, much more health related. And it's really a different type of guidance that we're offering our clients as well. And I think they're starting to see us in a new light based on that.
Okay. Are you excited about this opportunity? Is this a kind of a new opportunity for you personally and for the profession in general?
I think it is. And for me personally and for our office, we've been really looking at our office space in depth in the last year and a half to understand how we can help ourselves to work better. So selfishly, I think it's a great opportunity for Sasaki, but I think it's also with other clients led to another series of conversations and a deeper understanding of what the workplace means to people, really taking the workplace beyond creating a beautiful setting or creating a space that's interesting to people and helping to connect design back to behavior, back to, I guess, the liberal arts in a way, and understanding how people work throughout the day.
Sure. Great. Well, those are all the questions that I had. Is there anything else that you would like to add, or?
I can't think of anything else because I think we touched on so much of what we've been talking about, not just you and I, but in terms of the larger workplace experience as well.
Great.
I think the question everyone wants to know from me is, am I going to be able to get rid of office space? And my answer is that kind of depends on where you're at. But I think if you think about the long term, you're probably, the full term of a lease, you're probably not going to want to let go of that office space. If you're in a market that was hot, it's probably going to be hot in another 2 or 3 years again.
Right.